Okay, hey, so like today what we're going to do is talk about tools instead of cooking. But what we're going to talk about is how to sharpen a knife, particularly these modern Wusthof Trident style stainless steel knives, which are really a challenge to sharpen. I'll show you a couple of different ways and then I'll show you the right way. The couple of different ways is because not everybody has the right way. So let's get to it. So we're going to be doing this demonstration here in the garage because this is where I've got my knife sharpening equipment, although you could do it in the house. And so another tip here about onions, and especially when you're chopping things like hot peppers and jalapenos and stuff, I really recommend getting yourself some disposable gloves. And the reason for that is this. Someday you may own contacts if you don't already, and even if you don't, you're going to stick your finger in your eye after chopping an onion or a jalapeno or something, and you're going to wish to God you never had lived because it'll burn like crazy. I have had rub my eyes after chopping up jalapenos, and I've had to sit underneath water for 10 minutes. So make sure when you're dealing with something, if you're in doubt, use gloves. And onions, you know, they have that juice too. You might want to also use some safety glasses. So let's get going. So I've got two knives here. These are kitchen knives. They're both these Wusthof Trident knives. One's an older one and one's a younger one. And they both haven't been used in a while. And I'm going to go ahead and sharpen one of them. And that's what this whole program is going to be, is how to sharpen them. And I just want to show you the differences between dicing an onion with a dull knife and with a sharp knife. And we'll start with the sharp knife first. So this is a knife that I've just recently sharpened. Now, one thing about when you're dicing an onion, you skin it and you take off the growing part, the kind of the stalk part. You slice that off after you've cut it in half lengthwise, but you leave the bud part on, and then you peel off the outer rings of onions to get to the juicy part. And the reason for that is that this thing kind of holds the whole thing together while you cut. Now, with a sharp knife, you can't really do this with a dull knife. Sharp knife, you begin by doing careful slices. You keep your fingers like this away from there, and you go almost to the bud, and you're sliding it. You're not forcing it, because that's how you can get cut. And with a sharp knife, all you have to do is slice that through. So you slit it through lengthwise, and now you're going to go kind of with the grain, and we're going to chop down. And by having that bud in place, you're going to prevent these pieces from jettisoning all over the place. Keeps it all together until the end. So now I've got two cuts done. These cut in this direction, cut in this direction. Again, sharp knife important. Keeping your hands curled. Then you begin. Look at how those dices are coming out by just going down. You don't need one of those fancy chopping things. See how I'm keeping my fingers away from the danger. And one of the things you got to risk is if you've got a dull knife, sometimes you can be pushing on the skin and it will slide down, and that's how you can get cut. So be careful. Okay, now next what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this onion here and I'm going to show you how to do it with what happens when you're using a duller knife. And I'm only going to do a little bit of this because it is a dangerous thing. My dad always used to say, dull knives are dangerous, sharp knives are smart. And I keep that as a thing, and it's a good protection. Now I'm going to take this duller knife here and I'm going to show you what to do here when you're cutting and why you need to take precautions. Okay, you begin cutting same way that you did before. Really tough to get that in there. And then you can start cutting here. You got to be very careful about this. Cut carefully along the insides. Shit! Fuck! Oh, fuck! Oh, shit! God damn mother... Okay, so here we've got some sharpening devices. These things here, which you get at the store, oops, this one. There's two kinds here, and I'll show you what they are. They're colloquially termed to be called whetstones. So we've got one that has two different kinds of grits on it, a fine grit and a coarse grit, and a stone. And both of these we're going to soak in water for a few minutes. And that's because we're going to have some kind of a lubrication for applying our steel to these stones. Now, one reason that stones can be used to sharpen steel is this. It has to do with geology. There's a hardness scale called the Mohs hardness scale, which is a diagnostic element for determining minerals. And it's a scale from 1 to 10. It's pretty qualitative, but a mineral that is a 1 is a very, very soft mineral that you can easily scratch, whereas a 10 is the hardest you can get. So the softest material in nature is talc, the mineral talc. So the rock talc can easily be scratched with your fingernail, for example. And 10 is a diamond, the hardest thing known in nature. Now, what's interesting about that is that a 10 can scratch anything below that. So a 5 is typically something like steel. It's 5 to 7 range. So there are very few minerals that are harder than steel that can be used to scratch it. Steel itself, though, can be used to scratch it, and rocks. So we're going to use these stones to begin to sharpen our knives. Okay, so we're going to take a Wusthof Trident, really nice stainless steel, heavy-duty kitchen knife. This is the workhorse of any kitchen. If you had to have any one knife in a kitchen, probably this would be it, or some similar counterpart. And these things, they're really hardened steel, so it takes a lot to get them dull, but when they get dull, it takes a lot to get them sharpened. So here's the conventional way to sharpen any kind of blade with a whetstone. You start with the coarse, and you do most of the cutting on the coarse side. So you take your knife, and at about 25 to 35 degree angles, you work this across the blade like this. So you're basically grinding one side of the blade, and then you're going to change and you're going to do the other side. Now, I had this soaked in water, but I got to tell you this, we never did this as a kid. We never soaked our things in water. You know what we did? We spit on this. Spit is the best lubricant for cutting. And so, while you can go ahead and soak it to start with, spit on it. And keep it wet by spitting on it. Work on the tip. Kind of swirl it like this. Applying not real hard pressure, but even pressure, but you're getting the motion of the ocean. So I typically would go about maybe 20, 25 times in one direction, and then the same amount on the other. Working up and down the blade like this. And then periodically you can get some paper towels, and then you can wipe this down. Okay, when you finish one side here, the coarse side, flip this over. If you've got a holder like this, it's handy to have. Otherwise, you can have it in your hand. In fact, that's the way I do it. You know why? Because it allows me to spit on it. And now you're working the fine side. I need some more spit on it. Okay. The sound of sharpening. So, you know, different stone materials are used for the sharpening stone, and they've got to all have materials that are harder than the material they're sharpening, right? So it's the grain size, and really what we're talking about here is silica. SiO2, what makes up sand and glass. It is, on the Mohs hardness scale, I think it's 7 or 8. I have to remember and check that, which is going to be slightly harder than on a knife like this. So, that's why this works. And so, by going for finer grit, you're getting more surface area and smaller scratches is really what you're doing. It's just like the principle of sanding. You make big scratches, and then you go to finer grits to make smaller scratches and smaller scratches still. How do you know when you're done? You know, I've seen people take a piece of paper and do this and like cut it, and then, unless you can cut it, it's not sharp. I don't think that's the way to do it. You know, try it on a tomato, a ripe tomato, and if you slice with it and it goes in easily, sounds like it's good enough for me. All right, this is not my preferred method. You might run across a sharpener like this. These are called V sharpeners. You can see the V in there. And it has a number 1 and 2. 1 being that's the coarse side, and what you're doing is you're taking and you're working your blade back and forth, and it has, in that V shape, it's got stones on either side, so it's simultaneously working both sides theoretically at the angle you want. And then you go to the finer one after a while, and then you can sharpen on that too. I think these are a good idea, and I've used them a little bit, but not my favorite method. You might see one of these. They come with these sets. This is called a steel. Basically, what you're doing, it's a really small file, a really fine file, and during the course of working on something, if you're starting to lose your blade, you know, it's not cutting the way you want, sometimes you can reach for the steel and work it like this on either side. Basically, what you're doing is you're just taking some of the burr off of it that develops when you're using the knife. So that's a temporary measure and really not a sustainable measure, because it'll get dull really fast. So my favorite method of sharpening now is to use a diamond stone. Why? Because diamond is the hardest thing known to man, and I am not going to go for any fucking thing better than the best, right? Don't come at me with a diamond fight when you're carrying a knife. So the diamond file, there's many kinds, but what they basically do is this one here, which is about a $60 or $80 thing. It's not cheap to get, but diamonds don't wear out, man. So this has 2 grits on it. On one side, it's the 400 grit. That's pretty fine. And then a 1200 grit on the other side. So it's just like the other kind of stones. You've got the coarse side to do most of your sharpening, and then the fine side to take the scratches out of it. So what we have in here is industrial diamonds, and now almost all of them are industrial, finely ground, embedded into a metal surface. So it's just right on the top. In this case, it doesn't cover the entire surface, but it covers most of it. And you do the same kind of thing. If you have a lubricant, best one, spit. By the way, why do you want to have a lubricant? Because when you're polishing, you need some way to carry that fine cuttings away from the blade itself. Otherwise, it can actually dull the knife. So it's giving you a way of removing that friction, if you will. Some people call it a lubricant, but you know, and it is kind of. But what it is moving the cuttings away from it, keeping the knife clean as you go. This thing works like a son of a gun, man. What I like about this, and literally in the time I have right here, I'm going from a kind of dull knife to a really, really sharp knife. It just feels nice. It's like, since I got this thing, man. Okay, I'm going to wipe this off. Why am I going to wipe it off before I go to the fine side? I want to get any grit off there. Flip it over. Get some lubricant on there. No kid, this is the way you do it. Don't get the oil. Man, people have been spitting on their stones since they had stones and metal, right, man? All right, I'm just cleaning this off, really. I don't have to do much to this. The fine, just all you're doing is taking the scratches out of the other one. And that is it. This knife is really sharp now. And a sharp knife is the safest knife. Don't let your knives get dull. You hurt yourself, and cooking won't be as fun. You won't be able to make those nice cuts. And you won't be able to tell people that you know how to use a diamond stone and what the Mohs hardness scale is.